Hey, Soul Stories fam, we've got a sweet and totally swoon-worthy love story for you today. Let's jump in. Autumn rain sprinkled lightly over the cobblestone street, the golden glow of the lampposts shimmering in scattered puddles. Inside Willow's Corner, the aroma of freshly roasted coffee mingled with the scent of warm waffles, while soft jazz played in the background. Claire Dawson sat at a table by the window, her cream sweater draped snugly over her slender shoulders. Brown hair loosely tied back, eyes fixed on the half-read novel before her. This was her favorite time of day, quiet and far removed from the chaos outside. The door chimed. A tall man in a black suit stepped inside, walking with a straight-backed composure. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a certain chill, along with the lingering cold of the afternoon air. He chose the table directly behind Claire, set his leather briefcase on the chair, removed his gloves, ordered an Americano, and opened his laptop. Less than a minute later, the door opened again. Three men walked in, led by a middle-aged man with a paunch, slicked-back hair, a striped shirt, and an overpowering cologne. Spotting the man in the black suit, his face lit up and he extended his hand. "David, long time no see." "Hello, Mr. Brooks." David's deep voice sounded as he stood to shake hands, giving a short nod. Claire glanced over, catching the firm handshake, the mutual businessman look in their eyes, and instantly stamped her mental label. Same club. Brooks and his group took the table right next to David. A young waitress, barely 20 by the look of her, approached with a small notepad, politely asking for their orders. Brooks didn't bother glancing at the menu. A cappuccino, hot, lots of foam, absolutely clean cup, and make it quick, I'm in a meeting. His tone was curt. The two men with him placed their orders as well. The waitress jotted them down, smiled politely, and headed back to the counter. A few minutes later, while the cafe was still wrapped in the sound of rain and the smell of coffee, she returned with a tray of drinks. "Hot cappuccino for you," she murmured, setting the cup in front of Brooks. He glanced into the cup, raised an eyebrow, and let out a mocking chuckle. "This is your cappuccino? Are you stupid? Can't tell the difference? This is clearly a latte. You think I can't tell?" The waitress froze, stammering. I'm sorry, I'll change it right away." Brooks cut her off, his voice loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. "Change it right away? You're wasting my time every minute. My time is worth more than this lousy cafe and your ridiculous mistakes." The girl flushed red, her hands trembling. Claire slammed her book shut, her chair scraping against the floor as she stood up. She strode straight to Brooks's table, eyes sharp as blades. "Sir, you're in a cafe, not a boardroom, and a wrong coffee order is not an excuse to humiliate someone." Brooks leaned back, a faint smirk on his face. "And who are you to tell me how to talk?" "A customer, and someone who doesn't like watching others get berated over a small mistake. If you're in a hurry, you should handle things quickly and politely, not yell." She turned toward David, who was idly swirling his coffee, silently observing her as though complicit in Brooks's behavior. "And you, if your friend acts like this, the least you could do is tell him to rein it in." David looked up, his gaze deep and deliberate, voice low. "Interesting." The waitress returned with a new cappuccino, mumbling a quiet thanks to Claire. Brooks muttered something under his breath but said nothing more. Claire returned to her table, heart still pounding with irritation. When she left the cafe, David stood as well. They met at the door and he paused for a beat. "Not my friend," he said, his voice low and clear. Then he added, "But impressive." Before Claire could reply, he pushed the door open and stepped into the rainy street. She took a deep breath, telling herself, "I'll never see this man again." But that evening, when she walked into the blind date her best friend had arranged, the man waiting for her was him. Night settled over the city, streaks of golden light stretching across the rain-damp streets. Claire checked herself in the mirror one last time, adjusting her simple navy blue dress. This was her first blind date in 3 years, and something she had absolutely no interest in. But Lily, her best friend, had begged for an entire week, emphasizing each word. "Trust me, this guy is kind, stable. Just 1 hour. If it doesn't work, you can leave. Claire had reluctantly agreed, telling herself it was only to put her friend's mind at ease. La Belle Étoile glowed warmly in the middle of the block, its glass walls reflecting the lights like a cozy winter painting. Claire stepped inside, a bit nervous, not knowing who she was about to meet. A smiling host led her toward table number 8. She took a few more steps and froze as if someone had just pressed pause on her. Sitting there in a perfectly tailored suit was none other than David Carter, the cold-as-ice man she had publicly scolded in the cafe that very afternoon. Claire's heart skipped a beat. The scene from earlier flashed through her mind. The handshake with Brooks, the unreadable look in his eyes, the words, "Interesting." Part of her wanted to turn and walk out immediately, but the host was still smiling, waiting for her to take her seat, and David was already standing. "Good evening, Claire Dawson?" His deep, steady voice made it sound as if this were the most ordinary meeting in the world. Yes, and you?" She gave a slight smirk. "I didn't realize the universe had such a sense of humor." He gave a faint smile and pulled out her chair. "Please, have a seat. At least we already know each other." "Know each other?" Claire sat down awkwardly, avoiding his gaze, using the menu as a shield. Her fingers twisted the napkin, and she sipped her water repeatedly, as if to hide her discomfort. David leaned back, watching her with the ease of someone enjoying an entertaining film. He didn't miss a thing. The unconscious bite of her lip, the way her eyes darted away, the faint blush on her cheeks as she flipped the menu back and forth without actually reading it. "Are you deciding on your meal or looking for an escape route?" he asked, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Claire looked up, forcing a calm tone. "I haven't decided on my meal." "Good, because running away would make this evening far less interesting." She narrowed her eyes, setting the menu down. "You think this little coincidence is funny?" "Pretty amusing. It's not every day I get to have dinner with someone who scolded me in public." They placed their orders. While waiting, the air between them was a strange mix of tension and an undercurrent of something electric. Claire's voice was firm. "You still haven't answered why you didn't speak up for that waitress?" David rested an elbow on the table, his gaze steady on her. "Because I didn't think you needed help, and I wanted to see what you'd do." "So, you were testing me?" "Number observing. Maybe to confirm my hunch, that you're not the type to stay quiet when you see something wrong." Claire stayed silent for a few seconds. His words made her face feel warmer, and not from anger. Their meals arrived. Claire shared a few stories about her students, and to her surprise, David actually laughed. For the first time, a genuine smile softening his usual cold demeanor. He talked about his company's project funding education in remote areas, his eyes lighting up when he spoke about it. But David didn't miss the chance to tease her. "This afternoon when you walked up to the table, was your face red from anger, or because you saw me?" Claire nearly choked on her water. She set the glass down, tilting her head. "You really want the truth? Red from anger. 100%. I'll try to make sure next time it's for a different reason." His voice was soft but clear, making Claire take another sip of water just to hide the smile that almost slipped out. When dinner ended, the server brought the bill and David paid. Claire stood first, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Thanks for dinner, but if you want to make an impression, prove it with actions, not just clever words." David didn't stop her, just watched as she walked out of the restaurant, the faint curve of his lips still there, somewhere between a challenge and anticipation. On Thursday morning, the rain had just stopped, and puddles still dotted the schoolyard. Claire carried a box of her homemade salted butter cookies, but before she could step through the gate, she noticed a small white truck parked against the fence. 3 cardboard boxes stamped STEM starter kits. Donated were being unloaded. The principal hurried out to sign for them. A man in a gray baseball cap, black t-shirt and gloves bent down to lift a box with the ease of a seasoned mover. When he raised his head and the brim of his cap tilted up, the familiar eyes caught the thin sunlight. David Carter. Claire almost dropped the cookies. "You're right on time," he said, as if greeting her. "What are you doing here?" "Hauling boxes and signing up for the hands-on course you assigned me last night." Reminder, my assignment was actions, not stand-up comedy. Depends on the audience. In the assembly hall, students chattered in groups. Claire opened Charlotte's Web for the shared reading session. At the back of the room, David and the principal checked the kits: magnifying glasses, motors, copper wires, and LED circuit sets. A little boy lingered nearby, eyes wide at the tiny fan. David crouched to his level. Want to try? But remember to put it back in the tray afterward. He spoke slowly, without condescension, without ruffling the boy's hair, just treating him like a younger person worthy of respect. From across the room, Claire caught the image and thought that his chill had a structure to it, like disciplined gentleness. When it was Claire's class's turn, she switched voices for the spider's lines, and the kids giggled. David sat cross-legged, like an anonymous parent, and every time she changed her tone, the corner of his mouth twitched. At recess, Claire handed him a cookie. For the volunteer mover. Thanks, storytelling teacher. He inhaled slightly, smiling. Salted butter. Good guess. No, I've eaten plenty. What else have you studied about me? Claire narrowed her eyes. You sort paper clips by color, drink cappuccino with minimal foam, and bite the right side of your lip when you're nervous. You clearly have too much free time. Call it curiosity. About your work, too. This is my 4th year at this school. Not rich in salary, but rich in laughter. Sounds like a teacher recruitment slogan. And you? I work in a field where people think I don't know how to smile. He glanced at the children. Today I do. On Wednesday afternoon at the Neighborhood Community Center, the Sharing Fridge program launched. Claire was logging recipients and trying to install a new wooden shelf when her screwdriver failed her. A shadow appeared, offering a cordless drill. Mind if I try? CEO with a carpentry license, I assume. No, but I do have a license in reading instructions. They leaned over the shelf together. The first 3 times, David fastened the brace backwards, and Claire laughed until her eyes watered. You're definitely the writes a great check, lousy with tools type. Currently in advanced training. On the 4th try, the shelf stood firm. All right, you get 1 point for that. But one action isn't enough. I don't plan to stop at 1. They moved on to stocking the fridge. An elderly woman hunched over, quietly thanking them as she collected noodles and milk. David silently added a box of tea and a slip of paper with the address of a free clinic, speaking softly so she wouldn't feel embarrassed. Claire watched, feeling her chest soften, like bread fresh from the oven. Do you do this often? Sometimes, especially when someone tells me to prove it with actions. I also said, don't be cliché. Which is why I don't ask the elders to tell their life stories for a news feature. Quiet is sometimes faster. On Sunday, the Riverside Park held a cleanup and tree planting event. Claire's students all wore gloves too big for their hands. The man in the gray cap showed up and everyone assumed he was a parent, until a bee chased him around a flower bed. The kids burst out laughing. You just signed up for the comedy division, Claire said, clutching her stomach. I'm diversifying my data, David replied, still holding a shovel. They dug holes together, Claire steadying a young maple, David shoveling soil over the roots. Gentle, the roots need to breathe. Like people, especially CEOs. He held her gaze a moment, then nodded. Note, roots and people need to breathe. The kids competed to stick on the label Tree of Class 2B. David took a marker and wrote, Room for leaves, not for worries. He handed it to Claire. She laughed. Who taught you wordplay? A teacher I just met. She bites her lip when she's nervous. Stop monitoring my facial expressions. Number curiosity is my job. And me, can I stop grouping you with the wolves now? We'll see, he said, calm but warm. In the days that followed, they kept running into each other in places Claire never expected. At the book club meeting in the library, David sat in a corner answering emails. At tense parts of the story, he would glance up. When the library was shorthanded for covering books in plastic, he worked like a seasoned volunteer. At the fundraising cookie baking class, David manned the dishwashing station, introducing his efficient dishwashing workflow: soak, scrub, rinse, rack, making the parents laugh. You don't get tired showing up every day, Claire teased. I call it a commitment series. I need enough data to prove I'm not cliche. You're trying too hard. I'm learning timing, when to show up, when to step back, when to stay quiet. Quiet yet today? Number I want to ask. Are you okay? You dozed off twice this afternoon. Claire slowed. Stayed up grading papers. One kid wrote that his dream was for mom to have one day off without extra shifts. After that, I couldn't sleep. Name? Milo. His mom works 2 jobs. David nodded, made no promises, just quietly typed something into his phone and put it away. That evening, the sharing fridge held fresh milk and vegetables. The next morning, the school donation box contained an unmarked envelope. Weekend scholarship for Milo, so mom can take a day off. Claire didn't ask who. When she met David in the hallway, she noticed the faint shadows under his eyes. She only said, "Thanks to whoever." "Whoever just heard a teacher do an excellent spider voice," he replied, eyes bright like lamplight in the rain. Still, Claire followed the trail. The principal called it an anonymous fund. The community center manager winked. Tall guy paid the delivery fee, refused to put his name. Claire texted Lily. Why would he hide it? Because he wants real points, not PR. But why me? Because you said don't be cliche. Remember? Claire set her phone down, feeling a quiet warmth spreading inside. Not the loud rush of infatuation, but the sense of someone who had always stood outside now looking for a door into her world. Late one afternoon, Claire saw David standing beneath the young maple. He touched the label room for leaves, not for worries. At that moment, his face held none of its usual guarded coolness, only a gentle stillness. Claire cleared her throat. He turned, slipping his calm mask back into place. Checking the roots? Checking the breathing. Of the tree? Or you? Both. He paused, speaking low as if afraid the wind might carry it away. Turns out I still know how to smile, when you're around. Claire stood still, feeling a tiny crack run through the hard shell she used to protect herself. She took a deep breath. Don't say things like that too often. Sounds a little cliche. I'm cutting back. Then keep acting. I have been. I am. The afternoon drifted on with the sound of children chasing each other in the yard. They sat on the steps, sharing the last cookie. Two worlds, the glass-walled boardroom and the chalk-dusted classroom, were no longer perfectly parallel. They had met just enough for David to learn how to loosen, and for Claire to realize that sometimes softening a cold corner doesn't take blazing heat, but patient, quiet warmth, repeated day after day. And there, in the midst of small laughter, they began to hear a shared rhythm. That morning, the schoolyard still carried the scent of wet grass after the night's rain. Claire stood under the eaves, writing Kindness Week on the whiteboard in green marker, leaving small boxes underneath for her students to stick their good deed of the day notes. The kids bustled around her, chattering as they shared ideas. David walked by, holding a paper coffee cup, stopping to read for a moment before saying slowly, Kindness Week. Sounds simple, but might be hard for some adults. That's why you start with the kids, Claire replied with a wink. The adults can just tag along. He started to leave, then turned back. Are you free tonight? There's somewhere I want to take you. No gifts, I promise. No cliches. Claire chuckled. That opening line sounds suspicious already. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. When school ended, Claire was locking her classroom door when she saw David standing under the young maple in the courtyard. In the late afternoon light, the usual chill in his expression had softened. Beside him was a sleek black sedan, gleaming as if fresh from the garage. Let's go, he said, opening the passenger door. Claire hesitated for a moment. In her mind, businessman equals luxury car plus driver, but this time he got behind the wheel himself, one hand tapping the steering wheel with practiced ease. I thought you had a chauffeur. I do, but sometimes driving myself makes it easier to breathe. She slid into the seat, fastening her belt. The smell of new leather mixed with the faint scent of coffee. The car rolled out of the school gates, turning onto the Riverside Road, the sunset glinting off the glass. 15 minutes later, they stopped in front of an old repair shop tucked into a quiet alley. The dark green roller door was streaked with rust, and inside, the dim yellow light revealed the mingled scents of engine oil and wood. This is, Claire asked, not a gift. This is where I learned how to hit pause in life. David stepped inside, handing her a pair of thin gloves. Want to hear a piece of my past? The shop owner, a tanned man with grease-stained hands, broke into a smile when he saw David. David, been a while since you dropped by. David gestured toward a half-mounted black motorcycle. I was 13 when my mother died. Before that, my father had already passed, both within 12 months, one from an accident, the other from illness. I hated the feeling that everything could collapse and I couldn't hold it together, so I learned to hold everything. A full schedule, bolts tightened, meetings on time. If I couldn't control death, then at least I could control the rest. The shop owner tightened a brake, the click echoing softly. David watched, his voice lower now. Here, I learned when to let go, over-tighten, and the thread strip. Claire didn't interrupt. The smell of oil and hot metal tugged at her own memories. She took off her gloves, speaking quietly. I was almost married once. David looked up, his gaze stilling. Daniel, banker. Not a bad man, just afraid of anything he couldn't measure. When I said I wanted to stay in the classroom with this salary, he couldn't stand it. He wanted me to move into HR at his friend's company. More stable, more promising. I told him my future was with these kids. He said, that's just sentiment, not a plan. And that was the end. David was silent. The shop owner busied himself elsewhere, giving them space. So you still believe in the immeasurable? He asked. I do, but kindness has limits. I give with my whole heart, but I won't give up my self-respect. I love fully, but I don't abandon myself. David nodded. I understand limits, but I get the feeling you might be an exception. And you? What's your limit? Not promising what I can't deliver, not using kindness to control someone, and he pressed his lips together, then exhaled, trying to remember to let go at the right time. Claire's phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Miss, I'm coming early tomorrow. My bike's making a loud noise. Claire glanced at David. There's a bike that needs saving. Let me see it. The sedan wound through narrow streets until they reached the old apartment block where Ava lived. The hallway was narrow, lit by a flickering fluorescent bulb. A red bicycle leaned against the wall, chain slack, brakes loose, saddle frayed. David popped the trunk and pulled out a toolkit. Allen keys, pliers, a small oil can. I don't know if you prefer your help public or quiet, but with kids, quiet is usually better. Claire stood beside him, holding her phone as a flashlight. The sharp click of the chain seating into place sounded clean. He adjusted the brakes, spun the wheel, tightened with just the right pressure. She's a fast rider, Claire said with a smile. When we hit the exciting parts in a story, she practically leaps out of her seat. Then I'll make the brakes extra responsive, David said, tightening another quarter turn. But not too tight. Roots and people need to breathe, remember? A nearby door opened. A thin woman with hastily tied hair peered out. Miss Claire? Hi, has Ava gone to bed? Just fell asleep. She's been so happy about that star sticker you gave her. Kept talking about it. She glanced at the bike, then at David, her eyes misty but smiling. Thank you. Both. David simply nodded. As they walked out, Claire noticed the dust on his knees. A CEO with dirt on his trousers. Your PR team would be horrified. Luckily, they're not here tonight. Besides, some stains are worth keeping. On the drive back, Claire asked, after losing your parents, who did you live with? My aunt for a while, then dorms, then rented apartments. Living alone is easier to control. But the tighter you hold, the more some things slip. Like what? Sleep, or people you're afraid to lose. I'm not good at holding tight. I tie my knots loose, Claire said with a faint smile. So if someone wants to leave, they can untie it themselves. Very teacher-like, he murmured with a small laugh. Night air slipped in through the cracked window, carrying the lingering scent of rain and the faint sweetness of cookies from the box on the back seat. When they stopped on Claire's street, he asked, do you believe people can be kind and still keep their distance? I do, because kindness is a choice, not an obligation. And if one day you're tired, that's normal too. Thanks for allowing tiredness, he smiled. I'll still be at the school tomorrow. I owe you one more hands-on session. What category? Fixing a bike bell to match a heartbeat. That sounds cliché. I'm cutting back. Claire laughed. As he turned into the stream of night traffic, she realized the fragments they'd shared hadn't pushed them apart, but had brought their two seemingly different worlds just close enough to breathe together. That morning, the schoolyard buzzed with unusual excitement. Stalls lined the row of maple trees, decorated with balloons and hand-lettered signs and bright markers. The smell of baked goods, popcorn, and freshly roasted coffee mingled with the cheerful shouts of children calling to one another. Claire, in a sea blue dress, held a microphone as she stood on a small wooden stage in the middle of the yard, testing the sound. 1, 2, 3. If you can hear me clearly, please give a round of applause. The students clapped enthusiastically, a few parents joining in. Claire smiled. Perfect. Let's get started. Today, we're all here to raise funds for new library books and to renovate our school library. She introduced each booth, each game, and each student performance. Her smile never left her face, but her eyes caught every small moment. A parent bending to tie a shoelace, a boy tugging his mother toward the goldfish tank, a little girl hugging tightly the teddy bear she just won. Midway through the event, while announcing the next booth, Claire caught sight of a familiar figure in the far corner. David, dressed simply in a white shirt and gray slacks, stood at the used bookstall. He bent down to speak with a skinny boy in a faded dress shirt. The boy shook his head, his eyes lingering wistfully on a stack of advanced math books. David gave a faint smile, pulled out his wallet, and quietly handed a few bills to the volunteer at the stall. Claire kept speaking into the mic as if nothing had happened, but she mentally bookmarked the scene. Half an hour later, the boy was running off, arms wrapped around the stack of books, turning back to bow deeply in thanks. David only gave a small nod, as if he didn't want anyone to know. When it was time for the fun auction, Claire noticed something on the donor list. A mystery sponsor had contributed a brand new bright red mountain bike. She had a pretty good guess who. A quick glance at the crowd confirmed it. David stood among the parents, hands in his pockets, wearing an expression of perfect innocence. "This bicycle, ladies and gentlemen, will find its new owner today," Claire announced brightly. "Starting bid, $50. The bidding was lively, and in the final minutes, the boy from the bookstall won it, thanks to a parent who gifted him the winning bid. The cheers around the yard were deafening. Claire called David up to the stage to present the prize. He frowned slightly but came up anyway, taking the microphone. "Congratulations." He looked at the boy, then at Claire. "And thank you to our MC for selling my bike at twice the market price." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Claire shot back, "Oh, so it was you. I thought you were the anonymous sponsor." "Anonymous to everyone except you. You have a way of knowing things." "That's just my profession," Claire said with a sly smile, handing the mic back to him. By afternoon, a light breeze swept through the yard. The food stalls had sold out. The ring toss needed more prizes. Claire hurried back and forth, coordinating performances and recruiting parents to help. Every time she turned around, David was somewhere nearby, selling tickets at the fishing game, hauling soda for the refreshment stand, or crouching to secure a tarp flapping in the wind. Near 5 p.m., as the choir performance began, Claire stood in the wings, watching. The choir, made up of third graders in white dresses and shirts, sang with clear, bright voices. David sat in the front row, not pulling out his phone once, just listening. When the final note faded, applause thundered across the yard. Claire walked on stage, smiling. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've raised enough funds to buy all the new books for the library, and even have enough left over to renovate the outdoor reading area. Thank you to everyone who gave their time and support." Cheers and whistles filled the air. Claire caught David's gaze, and for the first time she saw him truly smile. Not the polite curve of his lips or the half smirk she was used to, but a real smile, open and warm, lighting his blue eyes. It made her pause for half a second before she continued with the closing remarks. As people began packing up, David walked over and handed her a bottle of water. "Excellent MC work. If I were a judge, you'd win most likely to make a crowd happy. And if I were a judge, you'd win best at pretending to be an ordinary donor." "Thank you. I've trained a long time to get to this level." Why do you do that? Help without taking the credit. Sometimes silence keeps sincerity alive longer. Claire looked at him a little longer than usual. The breeze ruffled a few loose strands of hair across her forehead, and for the first time that day, she didn't feel the urge to tease him. Any events tomorrow? He asked. Number. But next week is the autumn book fair. Planning to be an anonymous sponsor again? Depends. Will the MC sell my stuff at a discount again? She laughed, then suddenly realized. From the moment he stepped onto the school grounds that morning until now, she hadn't seen him check his phone once. The only times he'd lowered his head were to help someone or to listen to the children sing. And that made her want to understand him more. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. On Monday morning, the moment Claire stepped into school, she could sense the shift in the air. The usual warm greetings were quieter, some glances flicked toward her and quickly away. A colleague from the English department gave her a strained smile, as if wanting to say something but thinking better of it. Before she could ask, she heard whispers behind her in the hallway. See? I told you. They were standing awfully close at the charity fair. Not just close. I heard they went out to eat together too. He's a CEO. Who wouldn't want to? Claire's brows knitted as she strode quickly to the staff room. On her desk lay a tabloid, the cover showing a photo from the event last weekend. She and David handing the bicycle to the boy, smiling, his hand lightly on her back. The headline blared in red, "Beautiful MC rides the CEO's coattails." The sponsorship story behind the charity fair? The article was full of baseless speculation, claims that Claire got the MC role because of personal connections, that she was a regular teacher, suddenly getting special attention from a CEO, even blurry photos from a past community meeting inserted as proof. Claire gripped the paper, her heart pounding with anger, and a twinge of fear. All morning, a few parents hinted at it when they came by. "Miss Claire, that article isn't true, right? You really know him." They weren't openly hostile, but the way they stressed him made her feel under a magnifying glass. She forced herself to stay calm, smiling and refusing to comment. By midday, David called. His voice was deeper than usual. "I've seen the article. We need to talk." "Then meet me at the cafe at the end of the street," Claire answered quickly. The cafe was quiet, just a few tables occupied. David was already in the corner, laptop open to the online version of the article. He looked up, his eyes sharp. "I'll call my lawyer and have this dealt with immediately. But more importantly, Claire, I want to make it public that we're seeing each other. That will stop the rumors and give me a reason to protect you." Claire froze. Part of her felt safer hearing him say that, but another part bristled. "We've only met a handful of times. I'm not ready for the whole world to know, especially if it'll make people think exactly what they're saying now, that I'm leaning on you. They already think that. Going public will show them the truth." "The truth? That I'm the CEO's woman? David, I need time. I don't want what's between us to be labeled from the start." He was silent for a few seconds, his hand tightening around his coffee cup. He wasn't used to being refused, especially when what he was offering was meant to help. "You're letting them drag your name through the mud." "I know, but I want to prove for myself that I'm not what they say." Their eyes locked, hers steady, his protective but frustrated. David exhaled and gave a small nod. "Fine, but if this gets any worse, I won't just sit back." The next day, the rumors hadn't died down. In the hallway, Claire caught snippets of laughter at her expense. A parent canceled a meeting at the last minute, citing a busy schedule, but their tone over the phone was cold. That afternoon, heavy rain fell. Claire stayed late in her classroom, reorganizing the reading corner. A knock on the door startled her. David stepped in, rain dampening his suit, drops sliding down his hair. "I told you, I can't just sit still." He set a paper bag on her desk. "This morning I sent the paper a formal response demanding an apology and a retraction. This is the copy." Claire opened the bag and saw an envelope with a law firm's logo. She looked up to say something, but he continued, "I won't go public if you're not ready, but I'll do everything I can to protect your name." His voice wasn't loud, but it was unwavering. And in that moment, with the rain outside and his eyes on hers, Claire realized the tension between them wasn't just about the rumors. It was about the fragile line they were standing on. One step closer would mean near. One step back would mean far. She pressed her lips together and nodded softly. "Thank you, David." He held her gaze for a moment longer, then smiled faintly. "Consider it an action, not just empty words." The tease lightened the air, but Claire knew this storm was far from over. After the meeting at the cafe, Claire all but vanished from David's usual orbit. She didn't cut contact entirely, but her replies to his messages were short, politely minimal. He texted, "How's class today?" She answered, "Fine." He sent a photo of his coffee with the caption, "Missing a drinking partner," and she responded with a single laughing emoji. David, a man accustomed to the efficiency and decisiveness of the business world, recognized this for what it was, her way of drawing a boundary. He didn't blame her, but he couldn't deny the sting. In his wide office with its floor-to-ceiling windows over the gray-blue skyline, he often found himself pausing mid-task, eyes drifting toward some corner of the city, as if hoping to catch sight of her. Claire, meanwhile, buried herself in schoolwork. She arrived early, left late, even took on extra tutoring for struggling students. Busy was the safe excuse not to think about David or about the warmth and danger she felt in his presence. The image of that tabloid headline, "Young teacher rides the CEO's coattails," still cut at her every time she remembered it. One Friday afternoon, her class was working in groups when Mia, the small, timid girl who always sat in the corner, suddenly collapsed onto her desk. Claire rushed over, calling her name in alarm. The other children froze, some on the verge of tears. Claire scooped Mia into her arms and hurried to the school nurse's office, her heart pounding. After a quick check, the nurse said Mia needed to go to the hospital immediately due to severe anemia symptoms. Claire phoned her mother. The woman arrived in a worn coat, face etched with worry. Together, they took Mia to the nearest hospital. The doctor said Mia needed full tests and possibly long-term treatment. Hearing the cost, her mother bit her lip, her voice barely above a whisper. "Doctor, is there any way to pay in installments?" Claire's heart tightened. She knew this family situation. Mia's mother worked night shifts at a garment factory, barely making enough for rent and food. That night, Claire returned home late. Her small apartment was silent except for the ticking clock and the warm glow of her desk lamp. She sat down, searching online for medical aid programs for underprivileged students. She sent emails, made calls, but all the answers were vague. "We'll review the case and get back to you later." That word felt like a bottomless pit when Mia's health couldn't wait. She dropped her head onto her arms, exhaling deeply. A name flickered in her mind, but she shoved it away. David was not the solution. She didn't want to owe him anything more. On Monday morning, when Claire arrived, Mia was already at her desk, looking healthier, a neatly wrapped bundle of new books beside her. Her mother stood at the door, eyes red but smiling. "Miss Claire, I don't know how to thank you. A man, he said he's a friend of yours, paid for all of Mia's treatment this month and bought her the book she wanted." Claire froze. She didn't need to ask who it was. In her chest, her heart gave one long, hard thump. That evening, Claire stood on the sidewalk across from David's building. His apartment window glowed, spilling warm light into the city's night. She stood there, clutching her bag straps, like a traveler hesitating at the threshold of another world. All she had to do was press the buzzer, step inside, and she'd have to face him, his calm yet penetrating eyes, and maybe herself. But she turned away. Not because she didn't want to see him, but because she feared that if she took one more step, she wouldn't be able to turn back. From the high floor, David had seen her long before. He stood still, one hand holding an untouched glass of wine, the other resting quietly against the cold glass. He didn't call out, didn't send a message, just watched until her figure disappeared under the streetlights. He understood that love sometimes meant not rushing forward at any cost, but knowing when to stand still and give the other person space. That didn't make the longing any less. If anything, it sank deeper into each quiet moment, smoldering like an ember under ash. David turned away, setting the glass on the table. The golden light still filled the room, but it felt wider and colder than ever. On the late winter afternoon, the schoolyard lay under a thin, crisp layer of cold, like glassine paper stretched over the air. In the multi-purpose room, strings of twinkling lights draped from wall to wall, red and gold baubles crowded the branches of a Christmas tree in the corner. In green wrapping paper was snugly fitted around the donation gift boxes. Claire stood on a chair, placing the last paper star on the Merry Christmas backdrop, her hands trembling a little from cold, and maybe from anticipation. This year's Christmas party was for students from struggling families, kids who rarely had a tree of their own at home, and even less often had gifts waiting for them. "Miss Claire, should I put a few more snowflakes here?" Ava came running up, arms full of paper-cut snowflakes. "Perfect, my head decorator. Angle them a little for a natural look." At the back of the room, the principal fiddled with the music player. A volunteer parent was setting up a pot of hot cocoa, the scent of chocolate curled together with cinnamon and peppermint. Claire checked her game schedule, relieved to see everything in place. Cookies, fruit, warm coats. 2 days earlier, an anonymous fund had covered extra sandwiches and milk. Claire was grateful and didn't ask questions. She understood how good things often arrived, quietly, without fuss. By 6 o'clock, the children streamed in, bundled in heavy coats, cheeks pink from the cold. Their eyes lit up at the sight of the big tree. Milo, the quiet boy who usually kept to the back of the classroom, stood lingering near the gift piles labeled by age group. "Hey, where's your wish list?" Claire crouched down to ask. I like books more than toys," Milo mumbled, hands hidden in his sleeves. "Then when you visit the Christmas Eve reading corner, I've got a surprise," Claire said, winking. 10 minutes to 7, Claire scanned her plan one last time. All that was missing was Santa. The volunteer scheduled to play Santa texted to say he'd come down with a fever. The principal flipped through his contacts. "I'll call Luke from the gym. He might—" He paused. "Busy signal." Claire bit her lip. Without Santa, the party would lose a little of its magic. She was just about to consider putting the suit on herself when the back door creaked open. A tall Santa stepped in, red suit perfectly fitted, white beard covering half his face, nose red from the cold. He carried a large burlap sack, walking with slow, deliberate steps. "Ho, ho, ho!" The deep voice carried no obvious pretend in it. Claire blinked. She wasn't thinking of anyone in particular, but the way he moved, shoulders squared, eyes scanning quietly but warmly, looked far too familiar. "Santa's here!" the kids shouted, rushing to the makeshift stage. Santa knelt so he was eye level with them. Every time he received a wish letter, he didn't just nod, he asked, "Why would that make you happy?" Or, "What do you think you could do to get closer to that wish?" Each question made the kids' eyes light up a second time, as if being truly listened to was worth more than the candy in their hands. Claire stood at the edge of the stage, her heart thumping, not sure if it was from busyness or from Santa. When a boy hugged him so hard it jostled the beard, Santa froze for half a beat before hugging back, awkward enough to make Claire cover her mouth to keep from laughing. When Mia's turn came, Santa pulled a small brown paper package from his sack, tied with twine, a pressed maple leaf tucked under the string inside a clear envelope. Mia opened it to find a set of colored pens and a notebook labeled Mia's Stories. Santa leaned in and whispered, "You tell wonderful stories. Write them down." Mia nodded vigorously, eyes shining. Claire felt her throat tighten. The gift-giving lasted half an hour. Santa's "ho, ho, ho" wasn't flawless, but the way he bent down and spoke just enough for each child to feel like there was a Santa just for me couldn't be faked. Claire worked the line, her heart reassured by a familiar truth. Sometimes the world knew how to put the right person in the right place at the right time. When the kids moved on to ring toss and cookie decorating, Santa quietly slipped backstage. Claire hesitated, then followed, stepping around the curtain. In the glow of a small yellow light, Santa was taking off his white beard. Cold air from the hall drifted in, bringing scents of cinnamon and damp wool. "So, I guessed right," Claire said first, teasing but soft. David looked up, half his face now his usual self. He placed the beard in its box, loosened the red collar, his gaze holding a rare hint of self-consciousness. "Because my ho-ho was terrible," he admitted, mouth quirking. "And because you asked the kids, why would that make you happy?" That's a question from someone who knows how to listen. I copied it from the teacher of Class 2B, David said, smiling faintly. Heard you ask your students in book club. A brief silence fell, soft as snow. Outside, jingle bells played again, the kids' laughter carrying through as a ring landed on the wooden reindeer. Christmas? I never liked it, David said, looking down at the wool gloves. After I was 13, it felt like inventory day. Who's still here? Who's gone? I avoided it. This is the first time I've worn a Santa suit. Thank you for coming, Claire said honestly. The kids believe in magic, but magic needs someone to carry the bag and ask the right questions. David lifted his head. In his eyes, the reflection of a string of Christmas lights glimmered between the curtains. I know you've been avoiding me lately, he said plainly. I respect that, but tonight I thought, some things you just do. You don't overthink. I know about Mia, Claire said softly, almost too quiet for the air to catch. Thank you for helping, and for saying nothing. That's one thing I can absolutely do, David replied quietly. Say nothing. They stood together among cardboard boxes of spare gifts, the warm light coiling through the metal rails above them. A breeze through the door seam made the backdrop sway, the painted Christmas tree moving as if the wind had made it real. Aren't you tired of having to prove yourself all the time? Claire asked. I once threw you that challenge. Prove it with actions. Now it feels like I handed you a test. Tired, sure, David said honestly, but not because of the actions. The hardest part is learning the right distance. Close enough to help, far enough not to impose. I'm still not great at it. You're better than you think, Claire said, nodding toward the Santa hat on the chair. Wearing something silly to make someone else happy. That's a hard assignment. So, did I pass? He asked, half teasing. You get extra credit, she replied, teasing back. The kids' voices called from outside. Miss Claire, story time. She turned to go, then paused. Will you stay and help clean up after? Even Santa does dishes. Santa with dishes is an underrated skill, David said, pulling on his wool gloves. But I have a process. Knew it, Claire laughed. The story time took place under warm lights, the children in a circle, blankets over their knees. Claire read the snowy day, her voice as soft as the paper's hue. At one point, she spotted Santa leaning against the back doorway, listening silently, eyes free of their usual guarded chill. When the story ended, Milo was the first to run up and wish her Merry Christmas, followed by Ava tugging her hand. Read another, Claire grinned. Tomorrow, now it's cookie decorating. David joined the parents in the kitchen area, rolling up red sleeves, turning the communal sink into a true assembly line. Scraper, washer, rinser, rack. Don't stack them yet. Let them drain for 2 minutes, he advised, voice calm and matter-of-fact, like in a board meeting. The volunteers laughed. Santa washes dishes like a CEO. Trade-off, CEO like Santa? I can manage, David quipped. By 9, parents had started picking up their children. Outside, the Christmas lights scattered dots of glow across thin patches of ice on the steps. Claire pulled on her coat, carrying a trash bag toward the bin, only to find David waiting with 2 more bags. I could argue to take the heavier one, he said. No need. You get points for not being cliché, she replied, taking one. They walked down the quiet hall, just music in the background and the soft sweep of a broom. Setting the bags down by the bin, Claire paused by the small maple tree the Class 2B kids had planted. On its branches, a few paper snowflakes still dangled. I used to think rumors were the worst, Claire said, eyes on a trembling leaf. Now I think it's scarier to let rumors decide how you live, who you trust, and where you step. I don't want you to step anywhere because of me, David said slowly. I just want to walk alongside when you need it. Claire looked at him. Up close, she could see the faintest lines at the corners of his eyes, the deliberate restraint in the way he didn't reach out, didn't pull her into the warm space called, I'll take care of it. He was learning to stand on the edge she'd drawn, and that made her want to take a step closer. I trust you more than I thought I would, Claire said quietly, like placing a small solid stone into the foundation. Not because you help so many people, but because you know where to stop. A breeze stirred, making the lights flicker. David's mouth pressed into a smile which shifted back to his usual seriousness. Then I'll keep practicing. No asking for more, no going public, no false promises, just doing what I know I can do. Can Santa take on another task? Claire tilted her head. Does it come with a clearly defined scope of work? He asked, a flicker of humor in his eyes. Tomorrow, help me reorganize the reading corner. The kids need a new bookshelf. I need someone with a drill who can read instructions. I have that certification, he said with a nod. They lingered a moment longer, without needing to say more. At the far end of the hall, the principal opened the door, waving and wishing them a Merry Christmas. Claire returned the greeting, then turned to David. Thank you for tonight, for Santa, for the right questions, for the awkward hug with the first kid. I'll work on making my ho-ho rounder, he said quietly. Don't make it too round. It'll sound fake, she smiled. I like the real version. As David held the door for her, the Christmas lights reflected in the glass, merging their silhouettes for a moment. No hurried hand-holding, no grand promises, just a subtle shift in Claire's heart, from the doorway of doubt toward a quiet, sturdier trust. In the corner of the multi-purpose room, the Santa hat lay on a chair beside a handwritten card from a child. Thank you, Santa, for asking me why I'm happy. Claire folded it gently and handed it to David. A keepsake from Class 2B, she said. I'll keep it, he replied. Outside the gate, a thin snow had begun to fall, slow, light, just enough to change the color of the steps. Claire pulled her scarf up to her chin, offering a soft substitute for a blessing. Silent night. Silent night, David echoed, his voice low and warm as cocoa laced with cinnamon. And in the hush of falling snow, the party ended, but something else had begun. A trust without noise, without grand gestures, built instead on a glance, a respected distance, and a Santa hat hung on a hook. A reminder that sometimes the warmest act is the one left unnamed. On the morning of New Year's Day, the town still carried the lingering scent of wood smoke from the fireplaces, and a faint mist clung to each windowpane. At school, the sound of children's footsteps was livelier than usual. After the winter break, they were eager to show off their gifts and share stories of their trips. Claire walked down the hallway, arms full of papers to grade, her mind still replaying images from Christmas Eve, the warm eyes behind the Santa beard, the questions he'd asked the children, and the words, I just want to walk alongside you whenever you need. She had no intention of avoiding him anymore, partly because of that sentence, and partly because she had realized she trusted him more than she had thought. But to start over, they needed a straightforward conversation, no detours. At noon, Claire spotted David standing in the school's backyard, next to a row of bare maple trees. He was talking with the principal about sponsoring some new sports equipment. His gray coat draped over his tall frame, his hair slightly tousled by the wind. Yet his voice remained deep and unhurried as always. When he saw her, he paused for half a second, then smiled in greeting. Hello, teacher, he said, tilting his head slightly. Hello, Santa, Claire replied, then gestured. Can we talk for a bit? They found a quiet corner in the library where the midday light streamed down onto the long wooden table, the scent of old books mingling with the aroma of mint tea from the mug Claire had brought. She set the stack of papers aside and sat across from him. David was silent for a few seconds, as if arranging his words. Finally, he began. I'm not good at showing my feelings, Claire. I never have been. When I was a kid, every time I let myself get too close to someone and then lost them, it felt like a part of me was being ripped away. I lost my father, then my mother. I decided the safest way was to keep my distance. Don't let anyone rely on me too much, and don't let myself rely on anyone. His voice didn't tremble, but Claire clearly saw his hand tighten slightly around the teacup in front of him. But, he continued, that also made me cold, even distant, even with people I care about. With you, I did exactly that. Claire looked at him, her heart a mix of emotions. She recalled the times he stayed silent when she needed an explanation, the times he chose quiet actions instead of a single comforting word. Back then, she thought he was indifferent. Now she realized it was simply how he survived. I was wrong too, Claire said, her tone soft but steady. I judged you too quickly, based only on what I saw, without trying to understand why. I thought you avoided me because you were arrogant or didn't care. I never considered the possibility that you were fighting your own battles. David looked up, his gaze holding hers longer than usual. Thank you for saying that, he replied. They were silent for a moment. From a corner of the reading area came the sound of pages turning and the quiet murmurs of a group of students discussing their math homework. All a gentle backdrop as the two of them steadied their own heartbeats. So, Claire smiled faintly, how about we try again? But this time slow, no rushing. David raised an eyebrow slightly. Slow and steady? Yes, she nodded. We'll learn to trust each other through small things. No big promises, just no walking away when there's a misunderstanding. David thought for a moment, then extended his hand across the table, placing it near hers, not touching, just close enough that she knew she could take it if she wanted to. I promise, he said slowly, I won't disappear. I won't let silence stretch into distance like before. And I'll tell you when I'm not sure how to handle my feelings, instead of turning them into a wall. Claire looked at his hand, then gently laid hers on top. The touch wasn't tight, but it was warm and steady. I promise too, she said. I'll ask before I assume, and I'll give you time to open the door. A small smile tugged at the corner of David's lips. He turned his hand, lightly lacing his fingers with hers. I think slow and steady sounds like a business contract, he joked, his voice softer than usual. If that's the case, then this contract has no expiration date, Claire replied, her gaze carrying a hint of challenge. The midday sunlight poured through the window, spilling across the table, touching the two hands intertwined. In the quiet of the library, without any agreement written on paper, they had just laid the foundation for something new, a beginning without noise, but perhaps strong enough to weather every winter. In the weeks following their conversation in the library, Claire and David's relationship seemed to settle into a new rhythm, slower, yet steadier. The tense silences and guarded glances were gone. In their place were simple, unpretentious moments that, little by little, brought them closer together. Their first outing after the promise was on a Saturday morning when Claire invited David to the outdoor farmers market. At first, he was a bit surprised because in his world, grocery shopping usually meant having an assistant handle it or ordering online. Still, he showed up on time, wearing a navy crewneck sweater under a light coat, looking so ordinary that Claire couldn't help but laugh. You look like a regular person now, she teased, handing him a canvas tote bag. I'll take that as a compliment, he replied, his tone carrying a hint of dry humor. They strolled through rows of colorful stalls, fresh vegetables still beaded with morning dew, trays of pastries giving off buttery warmth, baskets of shiny red apples that looked freshly polished. Claire moved briskly from one stand to another, explaining how to choose ripe but firm tomatoes, how to tell if honey was pure. David listened attentively, occasionally nodding as if he were memorizing an important lesson. At the cheese stall, Claire tasted a sample and handed him a piece. David chewed thoughtfully, then suddenly grimaced. Too salty. It's not salty, it's rich, Claire laughed. Maybe your taste buds need a bit of training. That afternoon, they went back to Claire's apartment to cook. She tied on an apron, efficiently rinsing and chopping vegetables. At first, David simply stood and observed, but when Claire pushed the cutting board and knife toward him, he reluctantly tried. The result was a pile of carrot slices, each in a completely different shape, making Claire frown and laugh at the same time. If you ever worked in the kids' cooking class, they'd probably think this was a lesson in creative geometric freedom, Claire teased. Well, that's not a bad thing, David said, utterly unbothered. A week later, Claire invited David to help with an after-school cookie baking activity to raise funds. Initially, he planned to just watch from the sidelines, but the children quickly pulled him to the table. Soon, the image of the cold, composed CEO from corporate boardrooms fumbling with flour and star-shaped cutters became the highlight of the day. Wait, don't pour all the flour in, Claire began, but it was too late. David had accidentally dumped half the bag, sending up a soft white cloud that settled over his hair and coat. The children erupted into laughter, and even Claire couldn't hold hers back. David stood still for a moment, then chuckled too, a deep, warm sound that filled the small room. "I think," he said, brushing flour from his hair, "I'm better at signing contracts than baking cookies." "That's fine. Everyone needs a weakness to make them a little more approachable," Claire replied, her eyes bright. The rest of their dates were just as simple. Sometimes stopping by a cozy cafe in town, sometimes walking through the park, sometimes attending a student choir concert together. In each meeting, David opened up a little more, sharing about his orphan childhood and the years he had spent building his career alone. Claire listened without interrupting, occasionally asking questions that made him pause and smile. "You know," he said one evening, "I used to think happiness was reaching every goal I set, but now," he hesitated, "maybe it's just sitting here with you, not trying to do anything except enjoy this moment." Claire smiled softly, saying nothing, just handing him a misshapen star cookie, the very one he had baked the week before. And for the first time, David didn't try to fix it. The news came on an April afternoon, just as cherry blossoms began to bloom along the street leading to Claire's school. David appeared at the school gate without warning, holding 2 cups of bubble tea, the very drink he had once dismissed months ago as too sweet and completely illogical. One look at his eyes, and Claire sensed something was coming. They sat down on a stone bench in the courtyard, surrounded by the laughter of students heading home. David turned his cup slowly in his hands before exhaling softly. "I just got an invitation from the board. They want me to go to Singapore for a year to open a new branch." Claire froze, her heart tightening as if squeezed. A year for someone like David that could easily stretch into 2 or 3 if the project expanded. "Congratulations," she said, forcing a smile, though her voice trembled slightly. "It's not just good news." He looked at her intently. "I wanted to talk to you before making it official." They were both silent for a long moment. To Claire, every sound around them seemed to fade, leaving only the pounding of her own heartbeat. Questions swirled in her mind. Could a long-distance relationship really last? Could she bear the nights without him by her side? As if reading her thoughts, David spoke gently. "I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want you to give up your career or your life just to follow me." Claire lowered her gaze to her clasped hands. She thought of her classroom, the faces of her students each day, the joy of helping them overcome challenges. That was part of who she was, and she couldn't give it up. But David had become just as essential. "So, what do we do?" she asked, her voice catching. David shifted closer, his warm hand covering hers. "We'll figure it out. I can arrange my schedule to come back for a few days every month, or you can visit during your breaks. We'll video call every night if we can. What matters most is that you trust me and trust us." Claire looked up and met his gaze. Not the proud, composed CEO she had first met, but a man placing his whole heart into his words. "I trust you," she said softly, then smiled. "But if you forget to video call one night, I'm deducting points." David chuckled, pulling her into his arms. "Deal. And in return, if you ever ignore one of my messages, I'll come straight over to check on you." They stayed like that for a long time, letting the spring breeze carry away their worries, leaving only determination. For the first time, both of them saw it clearly. Careers mattered, but holding on to each other was something they could never replace. One late March morning, the schoolyard was bathed in soft golden sunlight, cherry blossom petals drifting gently in the breeze like a pink rain. Claire was arranging chairs for the Monday assembly when she heard a stir at the school gate. She looked up and froze. David was walking in. His navy-tailored suit fit him perfectly, and his smile was as bright as if he had brought spring itself with him. For the past year, they had kept their promise. Video calls every night, making the most of every holiday to see each other. But this moment, seeing David here, in the flesh, made her heart race so fast she had to take a deep breath to steady herself. He headed straight toward her, but instead of stopping to speak in private, he had a quick word with the principal, and suddenly the assembly microphone was in his hand. "Hello, everyone," David's warm, deep voice carried across the schoolyard. "Today, I'm not just here with gifts, I've also brought a promise." The students below began to murmur with excitement. Claire quickly stepped forward, ready to ask what he was doing, but stopped when she met his gaze, so gentle that it stole all her words. David reached into his suit pocket and took out a velvet blue box, opening it to reveal a diamond ring sparkling in the sunlight. Claire, this past year, every day away from you has been a countdown to the day I could come back. I want to start an education fund here so that children have more opportunities to learn. And I want you to be my partner, not just in this project, but for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? The schoolyard fell utterly silent, the only sound the rustle of blossoms in the wind. Claire felt her eyes blur with tears, both from emotion and from the shyness of being watched by hundreds of eyes. But then, in that very moment, she stepped forward and took his hand. Yes, she said, her voice trembling but firm. A wave of applause broke out. Children cheered, and a few teachers discreetly wiped their eyes. David slipped the ring onto her finger, then bent down to kiss the back of her hand, a gesture both formal and sweet. The wedding took place in early summer, warm and intimate. Not in a grand hotel, but in the school garden, strung with golden lights and lined with flower pots the students had planted themselves. Claire wore a soft white dress, and David gently adjusted her veil before they exchanged vows. They laughed often, held each other close, and in everyone's eyes it wasn't just a wedding, it was the picture of a family built on genuine love, where spring was no longer just a season, but the beginning of a whole lifetime together.